They took him off. And they took him off because the owner said take him off. I don't want that guy.
On August 18th, 2025, fans were shocked when the Browns named Joe Flacco as their Week 1 starter over Shedeur Sanders. Now the NFL itself is stepping in. The CEO has confronted the Browns owner and ordered Sanders to play, but the owner's shocking response left everyone speechless. Let me break it down. The draft day disaster that exposed the NFL's dark side. So Shedeur Sanders is caught in a storm of drama right now. He's just been sidelined from the starting QB role, yet somehow the NFL itself is standing in his corner. But before we dive into that chaos, let's rewind to where this mess truly began, the 2025 NFL Draft. The 2025 NFL Draft will forever be remembered as the day the league's mask slipped, revealing an ugly truth that sent shockwaves through the football world and exposed the kind of backroom power plays that would make political operatives blush. Shedeur Sanders, who threw for 4,134 yards and 37 touchdowns with a 74% completion rate in 2024, was widely projected as a top 3 quarterback prospect destined for NFL stardom. Instead, he watched helplessly as 143 picks came and went before his name was finally called by the Cleveland Browns in the 5th round. A fall so precipitous, it triggered allegations of conspiracy, racism, and systematic targeting that reached the highest levels of NFL leadership. The league's embarrassment over Sanders' treatment allegedly prompted unprecedented intervention from the commissioner's office, with sources suggesting Goodell personally contacted Browns owner Jimmy Haslam to ensure Sanders found a landing spot before the draft concluded.
It was the slide seen round the world. Round after round, all eyes were on Shedeur Sanders, whose name was never called until the 5th round of the NFL Draft Saturday, when the Cleveland Browns made Sanders the 2nd quarterback they'd draft over the weekend.
The alleged phone call between Goodell and Haslam reportedly occurred during the 4th round, as it became clear that Sanders' fall was creating a public relations nightmare for the league. Sources close to the situation suggest Goodell emphasized the optical problems of allowing a black quarterback with Sanders' credentials to go undrafted entirely, particularly given the league's ongoing diversity initiatives and the growing social media outrage surrounding Sanders' treatment. Stephen A. Smith didn't mince words, calling it a direct assault on Deion Sanders and comparing it to the Colin Kaepernick situation with the kind of righteous indignation that could power a small city. But this story runs deeper than anyone initially realized, involving allegations of coordinated owner resistance, racial bias, and ultimately, commissioner intervention that forced one of the league's most dysfunctional franchises to become unlikely heroes in Sanders' story.
And I'm gonna tell you, I spent a large amount of the last 24 hours thinking about nothing more than I was thinking about collusion. Because how in the hell does 32 teams in the National Football League pass on a quarterback that was universally recognized one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the country entering this draft, and 32 teams passed on him?
The Browns' decision-making process revealed organizational dysfunction that would make a soap opera writer jealous, and demonstrated how external pressure can force even the most reluctant owners into action. Owner Jimmy Haslam publicly distanced himself from the Sanders pick, stating, "If you'd have told me Friday night y'all are gonna pick Shedeur, I would have said that's not happening," while attributing the decision entirely to GM Andrew Berry. This wasn't just throwing your general manager under the bus. This was backing the bus up and running him over again for good measure, all while trying to maintain plausible deniability about the commissioner's alleged involvement. But Haslam's comments revealed something more sinister about the league's internal dynamics and the pressure cooker environment that NFL decision makers operate within. The Browns had not one, but 2 meetings on draft day, specifically about Sanders, suggesting the kind of high-level consultation that occurs when league office guidance meets local franchise resistance. As Pro Football Talks analysis pointed out, owners don't hold multiple meetings about players they're not seriously considering, especially 5th-round prospects who shouldn't warrant such executive attention.
It's one thing if the GM has the absolute call and he walks into the room and it's time to make the pick at 144 and he says...
There's no meeting and we just say, I want this guy.
2 meetings. Right. What do you think the meetings were about? Consider the context.
The meeting suggested internal pressure that sources indicate came directly from Park Avenue, where NFL headquarters serves as the puppet master for a league that prides itself on competitive balance while occasionally requiring strategic intervention. The alleged commissioner involvement wasn't just about Sanders as an individual. It was about protecting the league's image during a draft that was becoming a public relations catastrophe, with each passing round that Sanders remained unselected. The quarterback room in Cleveland became a microcosm of organizational chaos and reluctant compliance with league directives. The Browns now housed 5 quarterbacks: Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, Deshaun Watson, and Sanders. It was like trying to fit 5 cats in a bag designed for one. Someone was going to get clawed, and that someone appeared to be Sanders, despite the circumstances that led to his arrival in Cleveland. What made the situation even more bizarre was the timing and apparent reluctance surrounding the pick. The Browns had already selected Oregon, quarterback Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round, just 50 picks before Sanders. Gabriel was projected as a 5th to 7th round pick, yet somehow landed ahead of a player many considered first-round material. It was as if the Browns were collecting quarterbacks like Pokemon cards, except with significantly more drama, considerably less strategic thinking, and the added pressure of league office oversight that made every decision feel like a political calculation rather than a football evaluation. The internal sabotage allegations gained credence when examining Sanders' treatment during training camp, which seemed designed more to justify the organization's reluctance than develop their investment. Reports emerged that Sanders was receiving limited first-team reps and was allegedly throwing to equipment staff during practice, leading to accusations that the organization was deliberately undermining his development while maintaining plausible deniability about their commitment to his success. Stephen A. Smith didn't hold back, suggesting the Browns were setting Sanders up to fail in what appeared to be a coordinated effort to justify their questionable draft strategy and demonstrate that even commissioner pressure couldn't force genuine organizational buy-in.
Okay, if this guy's coming in and he's not that guy, if he's going to be maybe a backup quarterbacks are obscure. They're not guys that's in the forefront. And so if you're a team, do you want a guy that's going to come in with all the celebrity, everything that comes with Shedeur Sanders?
The Browns' handling of Sanders reached peak absurdity when Sanders suffered an oblique injury that sidelined him after his impressive preseason debut. The timing was suspiciously convenient for an organization that seemed uncomfortable with their 5th-round pick's sudden popularity and the attention his success was bringing to their reluctant compliance with league directives. Sanders had completed 14 of 23 passes for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns in his debut, earning praise from none other than LeBron James, yet found himself quickly relegated back to the shadows where the organization apparently preferred him. Perhaps the most telling aspect of this entire saga was the financial implications that made Sanders' treatment even more paradoxical. Sanders was projected to earn over $10 million in 2025 primarily from endorsements, making him the highest earning rookie in the league. Despite his draft position and his team's apparent reluctance to feature him, his merchandise sales were already leading all NFL rookies, creating an awkward situation where the player the organization seemed reluctant to feature was simultaneously their most marketable asset and potentially their most valuable commodity from a business perspective. The Browns' dysfunction wasn't just internal, it became a public spectacle when Sanders confronted Cleveland reporter Tony Grossi after his preseason debut, creating the kind of media drama that organizations typically try to avoid, but seemed inevitable given the circumstances surrounding Sanders' arrival. The exchange, captured by well-off media, showed Sanders asking, "What did I do to you?" regarding Grossi's consistently negative coverage. While some praised Sanders' confidence and willingness to address criticism directly, others saw it as evidence of the immaturity that supposedly caused his draft slide and justified the organization's cautious approach to his development. This controversy was setting the stage for something much larger. Whispers of conspiracy, allegations of collusion, claims of commissioner intervention, and suggestions that Sanders' fall wasn't about football at all, but rather about power dynamics, racial bias, and organizational resistance to league directives. The conspiracy that rocked the NFL to its core. The Shedeur Sanders draft saga quickly evolved from a puzzling personnel decision into full-blown accusations of league-wide conspiracy that made the most elaborate Hollywood plots seem tame by comparison and forced NFL leadership into crisis management mode. What started as questions about Sanders' interview skills morphed into allegations of racial discrimination, owner collusion, and a coordinated effort to humble the Sanders family that would make Watergate investigators take notes and prompted what sources describe as unprecedented intervention from Commissioner Roger Goodell's office. Antonio Brown dropped the first bombshell, claiming on August 1st, 2025, that NFL owners had a secret agreement not to draft Sanders, which Brown's owner Jimmy Haslam allegedly broke by selecting him under pressure from league headquarters. According to Brown, Jimmy doesn't want to publicly admit he broke the agreement between the 31 other teams, because doing so would expose both the conspiracy and the commissioner's role in forcing compliance with league. If true, this would represent the kind of collusion that makes antitrust lawyers salivate, NFL commissioners break out in cold sweats, and federal investigators start dusting off their RICO statutes.
This guy was considered one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the draft, and 143 picks came and went before you heard his name. Don't talk to me about football. I don't want to hear a damn thing about football. This ain't about football. This is about something else.
The conspiracy gained momentum and credibility when Boomer Esiason reported on WFAN that he spoke to personnel from 3 teams whose owners instructed them to remove Sanders from their draft boards entirely. Esiason's sources claimed owners said, "Take him off, I don't want that guy," and labeled Sanders as entitled, suggesting a coordinated messaging campaign that went far beyond individual team evaluations. The idea that multiple teams would receive identical marching orders from ownership suggested coordination that went far beyond coincidental thinking and pointed to the kind of systematic bias that would trigger federal antitrust investigations if proven true. Stephen A. Smith, never one to shy away from controversial takes, connected the dots in a way that sent shockwaves through the sports media landscape and forced uncomfortable conversations about race and power in professional sports. He compared Sanders' treatment to Colin Kaepernick's blackballing, stating, "This feels like Kaepernick-level collusion with the kind of moral authority that comes from years of covering systematic discrimination in professional athletics." Smith's analysis wasn't just hot air. It was backed by the statistical impossibility of Sanders' fall given his college production and the league's desperate need for quarterback talent at multiple franchises.
I brought up the name Colin Kaepernick. And why? I didn't sit up there and throw a pity party for Colin Kaepernick. I knew his career in the NFL was over the minute that the NFL organized that workout for him at the Atlanta Falcons practice facility.
The racial component of this controversy couldn't be ignored, especially when a Colorado Buffaloes fan filed a $100 million lawsuit in May 2025 alleging racial discrimination contributed to Sanders' slide and forced the league into the kind of legal defensive posture that typically accompanies systematic civil rights violations. The lawsuit cited leaked statements about Sanders' attitude as slanderous and claimed they violated the Civil Rights Act of 1964, while also referencing a mysterious 61-page arbitration report allegedly finding evidence of collusion against black quarterbacks. The plaintiff's legal team indicated they possessed evidence of coordinated communication between ownership groups, though this document's details remained sealed pending litigation. What made the conspiracy theories particularly compelling was the stark contrast in how different quarterback prospects were, treated based on seemingly arbitrary factors that correlated suspiciously with racial and cultural identities. Eli Manning faced no consequences for essentially forcing his way out of San Diego in 2004, yet Sanders was allegedly penalized for his father's similar advocacy. The comparison highlighted potential racial double standards in how quarterback demands were perceived, with white quarterbacks receiving preferential treatment for identical behavior that was deemed unacceptable when exhibited by black prospects. The conspiracy reached fever pitch when Dr. Umar Johnson publicly urged Deion Sanders to sue for $40 million, citing racial bias and calling for federal investigation into what he characterized as systematic discrimination disguised as football evaluation. Johnson's call to action resonated with fans who saw Sanders' treatment as emblematic of broader systemic issues within the NFL's power structure and the league's historical pattern of punishing black athletes who refused to conform to white expectations of humility and deference.
Because his talent is not a fifth-round talent. There's absolutely positively no excuse for waiting until the 5th round to take a quarterback who can play better than most quarterbacks available in the draft with the number of teams needing a quarterback. Y'all did this.
The conspiracy theories weren't without their skeptics, though even the skepticism seemed coordinated in a way that suggested damage control rather than genuine analysis. Hall of Famer Chris Carter rejected collusion claims on his podcast, stating there was not a collusion message with the NFL owners. They wouldn't be able to keep a secret like that, while simultaneously acknowledging that Sanders' treatment was unprecedented and statistically impossible without some form of coordination. Carter blamed Sanders' slide on poor pre-draft decisions, including skipping the combine and bad interviews, arguing these factors cost him $50 million, though he couldn't explain why identical behavior by white prospects hadn't resulted in similar consequences. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell was forced to address the allegations directly in what sources describe as an emergency damage control session designed to prevent further escalation of the conspiracy narrative. In a July 2025 press conference, Goodell denied any blackballing, stating the NFL doesn't blackball talent, and citing examples like Tom Brady's 6th-round selection to argue that draft slides reflect team evaluations, not conspiracies. However, Goodell's defensive posture, combined with his alleged intervention to ensure Sanders was eventually drafted, only fueled more speculation about what the league was trying to hide and why commissioner involvement was necessary if everything was above board. The timing of Sanders' eventual selection added another layer to the conspiracy narrative and suggested the kind of coordinated messaging that typically accompanies damage control operations. The Browns traded up to select Sanders at pick 144, suggesting they valued him higher than his eventual draft draft position indicated, while also demonstrating the kind of last-minute scrambling that occurs when external pressure forces organizational compliance. This move was interpreted by conspiracy theorists as evidence that the embargo had been lifted once the message was sent, and the league office applied pressure, allowing teams to finally consider Sanders without fear of league retribution or ownership displeasure. What made these conspiracy theories particularly dangerous for the NFL was their plausibility and the league's documented history of exactly this type of behavior. The league had previously settled a collusion case with Colin Kaepernick in 2019, establishing precedent for coordinated action against players deemed problematic and creating legal vulnerability that made Sanders' treatment particularly concerning from a litigation perspective. The similarities between Kaepernick's situation and Sanders' treatment weren't lost on observers, especially given the racial dynamics at play in both cases and the league's pattern of targeting black athletes who challenged traditional power structures. Deion Sanders' influence as a Hall of Fame player and media personality may have inadvertently contributed to the backlash against his son, while also providing the cultural capital necessary to force league intervention when the situation threatened to spiral out of control. His pre-draft comments about avoiding certain teams and his history of controlling Shedeur's career path led to perceptions of entitlement that NFL owners reportedly found off-putting, yet his status as a league legend and media figure made completely blackballing his son a public relations nightmare that required delicate handling and ultimately commissioner involvement. The conspiracy narrative suggested that punishing Shedeur was really about sending a message to Deion that he didn't run the show, while the alleged commissioner intervention indicated that league leadership recognized the situation was creating more problems than solutions. The legal implications of these allegations couldn't be understated. If proven true, the conspiracy would represent a massive violation of antitrust laws and could expose the NFL to billions in damages while also triggering federal civil rights investigations that would make the league's current diversity initiative seem like window dressing. The fact that the league was willing to risk such exposure rather than draft Sanders earlier suggested either complete innocence or breathtaking arrogance, while the alleged commissioner intervention indicated recognition that the situation required damage control before it spiraled completely out of control. Neither possibility reflected well on the NFL's decision-making process or its commitment to the meritocracy it publicly champions, setting the stage for a deeper examination of Sanders himself and the factors that may have legitimately contributed to his fall, while also exposing the uncomfortable realities of power, race, and influence in America's most popular sport. The real Shedeur Sanders, talent controversy, and character revealed. Behind all the conspiracy theories and collusion allegations lay the complex reality of Shedeur Sanders himself, a talented but polarizing prospect whose pre-draft behavior provided NFL teams with legitimate concerns that went far beyond his impressive statistics and created the kind of evaluation challenges that make general managers wake up in cold sweats. Understanding why teams may have passed on Sanders requires examining not just what happened in smoke-filled rooms or commissioner phone calls, but what Sanders himself brought to the table that made him such a divisive figure capable of triggering both systematic bias and legitimate football concerns simultaneously. Sanders' college credentials were undeniable and painted the picture of a franchise quarterback in waiting. 14,343 career passing yards, a 70.7% completion percentage, 141 touchdowns, and a record 49 consecutive games with a touchdown pass. These weren't the numbers of a fifth-round prospect. They were the statistics of a potential franchise quarterback who should have been selected in the first round by any reasonable evaluation standard. Yet Sanders managed to alienate enough decision-makers to fall further than any highly regarded quarterback in recent memory, creating a paradox that suggested either systematic bias or legitimate character concerns that transcended traditional football evaluation. The first red flag emerged during the pre-draft process when Sanders refused to throw at the NFL scouting combine, limiting his workouts to Colorado's Pro Day in a move that was widely interpreted as arrogant and entitled by NFL decision-makers who expect prospects to prove themselves under standardized conditions. This decision was widely criticized as arrogant, especially given that other top prospects were willing to compete in standardized testing and demonstrate their skills alongside their peers. Teams interpreted this as an early sign that Sanders believed he was above the normal evaluation process and wouldn't be willing to earn his opportunities through traditional channels.
Primetime Deion Sanders' natural bravado, coupled with that of his son, They say that the whole interview process wasn't that impressive. When he showed up at the NFL scouting combine and refused to work out, that hurt him. The interview process while he was there hurt him, etc., etc.
The interview process proved even more damaging to Sanders' draft stock and revealed character concerns that went beyond typical prospect evaluation red flags. Anonymous reports from multiple teams describe Sanders as cocky, entitled, and unprepared, with some scouts suggesting his attitude made them uncomfortable and raised questions about his coachability and willingness to accept criticism. One particularly damaging story involved Sanders allegedly responding to criticism of his game film by telling a team, "Maybe I'm not the guy for you," rather than addressing the concerns or demonstrating a willingness to improve. This type of response suggested a player who wasn't coachable, a death sentence for any NFL prospect regardless of their physical talents. Perhaps most tellingly from a football intelligence perspective, Sanders allegedly failed to catch mistakes that teams intentionally planted in their defensive installations during interviews, a test designed to evaluate a quarterback's football IQ, attention to detail, and preparation habits that Dillon Gabriel passed while Sanders did not. This test, which has become standard practice for quarterback evaluation, revealed concerning gaps in Sanders' preparation and study habits that suggested he might struggle with the mental demands of NFL quarterbacking. When coaches called out his failures during these sessions, Sanders reportedly didn't take the criticism well, further reinforcing concerns about his maturity and ability to handle adversity or coaching in professional settings. The baggage surrounding Sanders extended beyond his own behavior and created evaluation challenges that most prospects never faced during the draft process. Teams weren't just drafting Shedeur, they were drafting the entire Sanders family circus, complete with media attention, social media drama, and the ever-present specter of paternal interference that could complicate coaching relationships and organizational dynamics. Deion's high-profile presence and history of controlling his son's career path created concerns about whether coaches would actually be able to coach Sanders or if they'd constantly have to deal with paternal interference, second-guessing, and media speculation about family dynamics affecting football decisions. The specter of Deion potentially angling for a coaching position only added to teams' reluctance and created the kind of organizational complications that most franchises prefer to avoid entirely. Sanders' off-field lifestyle also raised eyebrows among NFL evaluators who are trained to identify character red flags that might predict future problems. He received 2 speeding citations in early 2025 for driving 91 miles per hour in a 65 mph zone and 101 miles per hour in a 60 mph zone. Incidents that might seem minor but reinforced perceptions of immaturity and poor decision-making that teams had already formed during the interview process. GM Andrew Berry publicly criticized these incidents as not smart, adding organizational tension even after Sanders was drafted and suggesting that character concerns weren't just pre-draft paranoia and Travis Hunter's exceptional receiving ability than Sanders' own skills, creating questions about how his talents would translate to more traditional NFL offensive schemes.
Do I believe that he was worse than Dillon Gabriel, who I love? I love Dillon Gabriel as a person, watched him live as a player multiple times. No, he's better than Dillon Gabriel.
That's right.
He's a better football player than Dillon Gabriel.
Sanders' marketability, ironically, may have worked against him in some ways and created the perception that he was more focused on building his brand than winning football games. His $6.5 million in NIL earnings during college and his status as a social media influencer with nearly 4 million followers made some teams wonder whether he was more focused on building his brand than winning football games, especially given his frequent social media posts and business ventures that seemed to receive as much attention as his football performance. The #2 legendary hashtag that followed him everywhere reinforced perceptions of self-promotion over team-first mentality and suggested priorities that might not align with traditional NFL culture. The pre-draft process revealed other concerning patterns that went beyond typical prospect evaluation and suggested a player who might not be fully committed to football as his primary focus. Sanders allegedly appeared more interested in discussing his music career and business ventures than football during team meetings, behavior that raised red flags for teams looking to invest significant resources in developing a franchise quarterback. While diversified interests aren't necessarily negative, teams wanted to see laser focus on football from a player they might invest significant resources in developing, and Sanders' apparent distraction by outside opportunities created concerns about his long-term commitment to excellence in professional football. When Sanders finally arrived in Cleveland, his adjustment period proved challenging and seemed to validate some of the pre-draft concerns about his readiness for professional football. Reports emerged that he was receiving limited first-team reps and struggling with the mental aspects aspects of the game, particularly the pre-snap reads and defensive recognition that separate college quarterbacks from NFL prospects. His request for Deion to stay away from practices, stating, "Dad, I may get 3-4 reps in practice. I don't want you seeing that," revealed both his desire for independence and his frustration with his situation, while also confirming that his development was proceeding more slowly than expected.
So I be hoping you got something positive to say about me. You always say negative stuff about me. And I'm like, I ain't do nothing to you. No, don't do that. I ain't see nothing positive that you ever say.
The confrontation with Tony Grossi after his preseason debut showcased both Sanders' confidence and his thin skin regarding criticism, creating exactly the kind of media drama that teams had worried about during the draft process. While some praised his willingness to address negative coverage directly, others saw it as evidence of the immaturity that caused his draft slide and justified the organization's cautious approach to his development. The fact that the exchange was filmed by his brother's media company and immediately posted online reinforced concerns about the Sanders family's media-first mentality and their willingness to create controversy for content creation purposes. Despite all these concerns, Sanders' preseason debut provided a glimpse of his undeniable potential and suggested that his talent might ultimately overcome his character concerns. He completed 14 of 23 passes for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns against Carolina, earning praise from LeBron James and ESPN's Dan Orlovsky while demonstrating the poise and accuracy that made him such a highly regarded prospect in the first place. The performance suggested that while Sanders had legitimate developmental needs and character concerns that required attention, his talent was undeniable when properly channeled and supported by competent coaching and organizational structure. The reality is that Shedeur Sanders represented both tremendous potential and significant risk, a combination that NFL teams historically handle very differently depending on their organizational philosophy, risk tolerance, and evaluation priorities. While conspiracy theories about his draft slide captured headlines and raised important questions about systematic bias in NFL evaluation processes, the more mundane truth was that Sanders' own actions and attitude provided teams with plenty of football-related reasons to pass on him despite his obvious physical talents and college production. Whether those reasons justified a fall to the 5th round remains debatable and will likely be determined by Sanders' eventual NFL success or failure, but they certainly explain why a player with first-round talent found himself in Cleveland's crowded quarterback room, fighting for every rep and every opportunity to prove his doubters wrong while also validating the faith shown by those who believed in his potential. Thanks for watching and goodbye for now. To stay informed with more of such videos, click on the card showing on the screen.